And welcome to all of you who are watching us here on our Global Unites page. As we promised, as the COVID-19 outbreak has happened around the world, we promised that we'll give you updates about our team responding and on what they've done to hear from them. So today, we're going to talk to all of our national directors. Right now, I'm speaking to Amos, our national director from Uganda Unites. Amos, good morning.
Good morning, Prashan. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Hope you're doing well.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, we've been so amazed at the work that you and the Ugandan Unites team have done in the midst of this crisis. But one thing that the global community is now coming to understand is that countries that have been through difficult times seem to possess a deeper resilience to overcome. And Uganda is one such country. You've been through civil wars, you've been through various challenges, with the government and with political instability, and a lot of things have happened in the country. But still, there seems to be a resilience that propels the nation forward. How have you seen that in your own community?
It's true, Prashan. As you have mentioned, Uganda has been through many civil wars and pandemics, and people constantly, one of the things that brings that resilience is that people constantly rally around their communities, their small communities. During this particular pandemic, we've seen people, because of having to stay within their locations, they start to connect with one another. And as we know, getting to know your neighbors is very key to be able to withstand such pandemics, and supporting each other is another key thing, and being able to look out for one another. A typical example is when somebody moved into our community, into one of the communities in Uganda, and sneaked in from a neighboring country, and the people were alert at the fact that this person had come in from a different country and hadn't been tested. And so they organized themselves as a community to get the teams in place so that the testing of that person could be done. And for sure, the person tested positive for COVID-19. And that was because the community was able to identify the people and be able to work together. So community is one of the biggest things in Uganda to be able to get through such pandemics and have resilience.
Yeah. So communities and the strength of a community-based culture has been one ingredient that's helped Uganda through the years, through various challenges for sure. But speaking of, at the same time, a thing that comes along with community is the generosity of our own countrymen. Obviously, the entire world is on their knees. They don't have the capacity to help the countries, and even our own governments may not have the financial capacity to help the financial outbreak that's happened from this. So, how have you seen the generosity of the Ugandan people manifest itself during this time?
Fortunately, we are seeing the depth of human compassion and generosity in this time, as we did in past disasters, with people providing mutual aid and comfort by volunteering to give out food, making and donating face masks, and redirecting resources to support those most in need. We have seen people, another example I can give, we've seen people like the gentleman is called Gonzax Sentongo, who decided to ride his bicycle to deliver antiretroviral drugs for those with HIV patients in his community who could not access hospitals because the public ban of public transport. We have seen people donate to the National Task Force from as little as $2.8. I myself have been a recipient of people's generosity in my community. Two of my neighbors brought me food for my daughters, thinking that this lockdown would be difficult on our family, and they felt that the girls needed to have something to eat. But even the organization, the movement as Uganda Unites, has benefited quite a lot from the generosity of the community. And we were able to raise $500 locally that has been able to go towards supporting other communities of people, of daily wage earners who were not able to provide for their families. And that's the kind of generosity we're looking at, people donating from as low as $1 to make sure that they get us over the line to be able to support others. And we've seen other groups come together to be able to support other people within their smaller communities or outside of their communities.
No, that's amazing, and it's inspiring, especially because most of the countries, especially Uganda, for sure, there are many people living under the poverty line, but that's not kept them from depicting their humanity and their generosity to one another. So thank you for sharing that. Finally, I want to talk to you about some challenges that are unique to Uganda right now, some things that you guys feel you have to overcome in the next few weeks and months and years ahead.
Challenges. I think one of the challenges that cuts across, and we have talked about this on the Global Unite platform, uh, the unemployment that is coming, that is already showing up because of this pandemic, is very clear in Uganda. We've had companies release people from employment. We know that because of the lockdown, a lot of the daily wage earners were now unable to go out and earn. And most of the people in Uganda are daily wage earners. They go out there and go and pick something, sell something on the street so that they can feed their families. And without that, we see an increase in unemployment. And one of the other things, coming from a country that is from sub-Saharan Africa, is that we need to understand that a lot of us depend on imports, and so a lot of the things, products that are used within the country, are imported from China and other countries. Now, China being the hub of where everything started from, uh, means that the supply chain is disrupted. And if the supply chain is disrupted, that means that a lot of uh, people who've invested in that kind of business as well lose their businesses because they're importing things. Now they can't import things anymore. The people they employ still goes back to unemployment. People lose that. And then there is the aspect of the fact that as a sub-Saharan African country and a third world country, you constantly depend on foreign direct investment. So we have people coming in from other countries to invest in Uganda. And now we do not have that income coming in because we do not have people coming in to invest because their countries have been hit just as our country has been hit. And so you do not have that coming. But then also we have a lot of Ugandans living in the diaspora. And because they live in the diaspora, they bring in when they make money outside there, they bring it into the country to do other investments, look after families, look after people. And because they are losing their jobs in the countries they're in, that money is also not coming to support their families or to support this economy. And so things get out of hand. But the other thing is that Uganda, 7.7% of our GDP is supported by tourism. Because you've been here, you've seen how vibrant our country is when it comes to the
Beautiful.
beauty and all. And so a lot of people come in for that. And now we do not have people going to come in because our borders are closed, our airport is closed. Because of social distancing, we cannot have people coming in to use those amenities and different experiences. And that sector alone employs 700,000 people, approximately. So if those people are losing their jobs, the sector is losing money. And if people are not importing, that means the government is collecting less taxes. If the government is collecting less taxes, that means that these other services that Ugandans that cannot pay for those services, means that the government will struggle to provide those services to the people at the grassroots in different rural communities. And that is going to be very detrimental. But all of that, if you look at all of that, then it boils down to one thing. There'll be a certain increase in crime, because if somebody cannot feed their family, if somebody cannot feed themselves, they're going to look at other avenues to provide. And so that definitely brings an increase in crime. But then also, because people have been staying at home indoors, the other thing that we have seen is that there's an increase in domestic violence. And that is because the men in the family feel that if they can't provide, they're trying to put their anger elsewhere, and that anger goes into domestic violence. And so we're seeing all these things boil up, and because of the different challenges that are happening within the community. But those are some of the challenges that we see coming up, and some of the things that will definitely experience.
Yep, truly, we're definitely living in difficult times, and I could see all of what you said being overwhelming challenges. But in the midst of that, we know that we're trying to respond as we could, especially with helping young entrepreneurs at this time to start building their own economy and supporting the nation's economy, trying to create jobs for those who have lost their jobs. So that's going to be a huge part. But along with that, you said young people being drawn to criminal activity or drawn to violence and things like that, we have a role to play as a movement, apart from aid and apart from taking care of our neighbor as we're doing. So, how do you see the importance of Uganda Unites right now? Tell me some. Why should Uganda Unites continue to exist, and maybe even more so than usual during this time?
Yeah. I think one of the misconceptions that has happened is that even though the virus makes all countries appear to sit at the same table, in practice, we're not. Some
Mm,
countries will be more affected than others, with a risk of the crisis translating into new violent conflict.
mm,
Yeah, like you've mentioned, pockets of young people joining criminal gangs and other things. The virus only silences the violence
mm,
that has been already existing within the communities. And actually, in my opinion, while it makes it sometimes appear like the prejudice is now not there, um, it amplifies it in a way. And this doesn't mean that the community, all of this violence and prejudice stop existing within our communities. We have several situations of violence during this time, and signs to show that it's going to increase. Uh, Uganda has a population of 42 million people, and 75% of those are young people. Now, if you look at those young people, many of whom will be left without jobs at the end of this. Yeah, many will drop out of school due to the pandemic or due to the fact that their parents can't afford to take them back to school after the pandemic. Now, because of all of that, these young people are easy targets for radicalization. And if they're easy targets for radicalization and they are being targeted by groups in exchange for a better life, that is why the work that we do is very important. Um, Giving out the food that we give, the food aid and support that we give, seems as if it's just fixing a food problem, a feeding problem. But that providing food for the people that are within our communities stops violence in a way. Because if somebody was going to be to attack somebody because they wanted to feed their family, but when you provide that food, you're able to ensure that the people are fed and they're not going into violent conflict to provide for their families, countering radicalization and providing the young people with hope and direction post COVID 19. Because after this pandemic, we need young people to see themselves in a way that they can rebuild, that we can go forward, that we can do better. And the hope is in them because they have the numbers and because the country relies on them to be able to rebuild. And so we need to be there to continue the work that we've been doing of making sure that we are providing the direction that is needed. And one of the other things that Uganda Unites is in the process of doing, even as the COVID 19 pandemic struck, is that we are in the process of setting up reconciliation centers across the country.
mm,
And these reconciliation centers provide skilling for young people so that they are employable, or at the very least, support them to be able to start a business that not only solves a problem within their community, but also provides income for their families and ends a cycle of poverty within uh, within their community and various areas. And so it is still very important for us to be able to continue with the work that we're doing within the community.
mm. Well, thank you very much, Amos. I think it was very clear on why Uganda Unites needs to continue to persevere, in the midst of this, continue to serve the people in the short term, midterm, and the long term. So thank you for having the vision. Thank you for standing strong and being there for such a time as this. So we wish you well. You guys are in our thoughts and prayers. Much love to the entire team and keep up the great work. Thank you for the update.
Thanks, Prashan. And we thank you all for the support, and to everybody who has donated to make sure that we provide these food supplies to the people to so that they can stay in their homes. We thank you, and everybody who continues to donate to Uganda Unites to make sure that we do the work that we do. We thank you because you make this possible, and we still have hope in the young people and in our nation.
Thank you. All the best, Amos.
Cheers, Prashant.
Bye. Cheers.